I'm going to turn now to Mr. Dean.
If I remember correctly, I think I had finished my direct examination.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you didn't have some last questions you wanted to ask.
If I had, I would have lost.
Okay, Mr. Dean, thank you. Mr. Hilliard?
Thank you, Judge.
It's not a hard time.
Good, sir. Yourself? Pretty good. I can't complain.
Some of the questions I'm going to have will be a little bit repetitive, but it's just to kind of get straight in my mind. You're in the Marine Corps, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. How long were you in the Marine Corps?
I had approximately 8 years active duty, and I just retired as a reserve officer about 2 years ago.
Well, thank you for your service, Agent Schneider. And then you went into the FBI, correct?
That's correct.
And how long have you been there?
18 years.
Okay. And during that 18 years, what is the bulk of what you've done there?
We're a small office here in Savannah, so for the 15 years I've been in Savannah, I've worked a little bit of everything from violent crimes against children to both international and domestic terrorism, and then for the past 10 years I've been the coordinator for the FBI Southeast Georgia Violent Crimes Task Force.
Okay. And that's for the last 10 years, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. Does it have a cool acronym? Southeast Georgia Violent Crime Task Force? That's a mouthful.
Take the first letter of every one of those words, and that's the acronym.
Okay. How would you say that then?
I wouldn't even want to, hazard a guess.
All right. So when you got involved in this particular case, you pretty much were involved on October 5th, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And on October 5th, what exactly did you do on October 5th?
October 5th started out with a call to Detective Lemons to determine whether or not Chatham County needed the FBI's assistance.
No, I don't mean a rehash of what you've already said you did. I mean, your actual involvement. Did you conduct the interviews on October 5th? Let me ask a more specific question. So on October 5th, did you conduct any interviews on October 5th?
Conducted multiple interviews on October the 5th.
And who did you interview on October 5th?
October 5th, specifically the defendant, I think on 2 separate occasions, 2 interviews with the defendant. I did not speak with Paul on October 5th, but I did speak with Danny at some point on October 5th as well.
Hold on, my pen's running out. Give me 1 second. All right, so on October 5th, you spoke with Ms. Simon at least twice. You did not speak with Paul, but you did speak with Danny, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And you spoke with Danny again on October 6th or 7th or both?
I don't recall exactly. There were multiple times. I had telephone conversations with Danny, but I know for sure I spoke with Danny on October the 7th.
Okay. So maybe on the 6th, but 7th for sure.
Absolutely.
And how about Miss Simon? You speak to Miss Simon on the 6th or 7th or no?
I don't think so. I think just October 5th primarily.
All right. And October 7th was the day you got permission from Danny to wire the hotel room, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I assume the hotel room was over there off of Chatham Parkway, from what my understanding was. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think it was over there off Chatham Parkway, wasn't it?
That's correct.
Okay. And you said you had, how was the room wired up?
I wasn't involved specifically in that aspect of we have a team that handles that. I just know that we had a room that we had rented adjacent to that room where we were able to live monitor on the video feed. Again, almost like a hotel room has an adjoining door, that type of setup. And we had both audio and video in that room to hear what was going on.
And so you're in one room next door, videotaping and audio taping everything. They're in the other room living their life, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And Danny knew that it was being recorded, correct?
Absolutely.
And Miss Simon did not, correct?
She did not.
Okay. And how long did that recording last?
Less than 24 hours. I think we had it. They stayed the evening there and they checked out the following day. So I don't know the exact number of hours that we had it, but it was less than 24.
Okay. So 10/7 to 10/8 maybe?
Approximately.
Or 10/8 to 10/9, whatever it was, somewhere in that time frame. Is that correct?
I would have to look at a report to verify that, but I don't know the exact date, no, sir.
The date's not important. The point is for that time period, it was pretty much around the clock surveillance, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
And he also gave you permission to tap his phone, correct?
That's correct, he did.
And how long did that last?
It was at least 30 days. I think we did one renewal, so it may have been for a 60-day period. But again, there was another agent that was handling the administrative aspects of that. I believe it was possibly 60 days.
Okay. Well, and I'll ask, did you review the video and audio tape of the hotel room?
Just excerpts of that. Again, there were multiple facets to this investigation, and that's not something that I personally did, was review that particular video.
So you saw excerpts, but you didn't watch the whole thing.
That's correct.
I assume anything of any importance or what you deem relevant, you would look at, correct?
Not necessarily. The agent that was responsible, for that would have reviewed that and highlighted that.
And who was the agent that was responsible for that?
I believe that was Special Agent Solomon that had that
Okay.
responsibility.
All right, so Solomon was the one who was ahead of that particular
That's correct.
endeavor, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right. And Danny's phone, who was the special agent in charge of that one? Was that you or was that Agent Solomon as well?
The particular aspects, so both Agent Solomon and myself obtained the consent, from Mr. Youngkin to get the authorization to wiretap that phone. But the day-to-day monitoring of that phone was Special Agent Solomon's responsibility.
Okay, and that's fine. So Solomon basically watched the video and audio from the hotel room and reviewed the tap on the phone, correct?
That's correct. Again, not solely her responsibility. There were, multiple, people reviewing that, but primarily it fell on her shoulders.
Okay, and that's fine. So, but you did interview Danny on the 5th, maybe the 6th, but definitely the 7th, correct?
That's correct. And again, I had, in between those times, I had multiple telephone conversations with Danny as well.
All right. And do you recall the conversation and the interview you had with Danny on October 5th?
You have to give me more clarification on that, sir.
Well, have you, in preparation for trial, have you reviewed that interview with him?
Which particular interview, sir?
The first interview you had with Mr. Youngkin?
I'm sure I have at some point.
Okay. And do you remember when he said there was nothing weird about her going to Arkwright Drive in that interview?
Not specifically, but again, she provided that information in the interview that I was present for, that she had been to Arkwright Drive 100 times or more.
Okay. Did he ever say that he had gone to Arkwright Drive?
I don't know that Danny had mentioned that to me, but we do know through the course of the investigation that Danny accompanied her. Either he was driving or the defendant was driving on the numerous occasions that they traveled to Arkwright Road.
Did he ever talk about going out there by himself?
Not that I recall, no, sir.
Did he ever admit to going out there by himself, to the best of your knowledge? To you, at least.
Not that I recall.
Okay. Now, in that initial interview, do you remember him saying that he was awake when she got back from Arkwright?
Your Honor, I'm going to object on hearsay grounds to I'm glad if he's live and any further questions about what Danny did or didn't say. He's testified at this point.
Mr. Hood?
Your Honor, it's not hearsay. He's already testified, okay? This is the agent that conducted the interview. I have the absolute right on cross-examination to talk about the inconsistencies in Danny Youngkin's statements to him versus what he testified here in court. So whatever issue he has, it's not hearsay, number one. Danny's already testified to this. Number two, the agent has the right to testify as to his recollections. If he doesn't recollect it, great, we move on. But if he does, it's a proper cross-examination question, Judge.
Mr. Dean?
I just don't think that's a proper reading of the current rules of evidence that have been in place for the last 10 years or so. If there was something that Mr. Youngkin was confronted with while he was up there and given a chance to confirm, deny, explain, then it would be a proper subject for testimony by another witness. But if not, you can't just ask another witness what a witness who testified previously said just because they testified.
Before we go any further into the weeds in this argument, I'm going to allow you leeway to go ahead and ask these questions. I'm overruling the objection.
Thank you, Judge. So, Agent Snyder, do you remember Danny saying that he, at 3:30 when he got up to feed Sky, that Quinton was okay? And he saw him?
I don't recall that, no, sir.
Okay. Do you remember him saying at 5:30 that Quinton was okay?
I do recall Danny saying that on October the 5th, but in the October the 5th interview, it was unfathomable to Danny, that something like this had taken place. So while Danny did, on October 5th, during that interview, mention that he did indeed see Quinton, we further went down that path with Danny on multiple occasions, specifically October 7th, and he could not recall seeing Quinton as he walked out of that bed that morning. It was a rush that morning. He was late for work. The physician
Your Honor, at
In
this
dark
point in time, I'm
hours.
going to object. It's non-responsive to the question I asked, number one. He's basically giving a narrative to what was basically a yes or no question. I understand he's trained to do that, but it's still improper.
Mr. Dean?
The general proposition is that the witness is allowed to finish his answer. Mr. Hilliard is the one that's inviting all this testimony about out-of-court statements made by Daniel Youngkin. You know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, as nobody says anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Special Agent, you do speak in paragraphs. So, Mr. Hilliard, ask your question. Agent, answer the question.
Isn't it true on October 5th that Danny Youngkin stated that he had glanced in the crib at 5:30 and Quinton was okay?
That's what he stated on October 5th.
Okay. Now, isn't it also true that he also said he was the one that texted the babysitter that the kids were staying home that day, correct? On October 5th.
Danny did state that on October the 5th.
Okay. Now, do you remember during the conversation where Danny got angry and said that he needed to drink?
Could you please restate that one, please, sir?
I will. Do you recall him stating that he's having a bad day, it feels weird, and that he drinks all the time and needed a drink to even himself out?
And what date was that, sir?
October 5th, I believe. If you don't remember it, that's fine.
Mr. Hilliard, I want to ask, why is defense asking these questions?
Well,
No, Mr. Dean.
you have to have Mr. Hilliard monologize on his theory of the case in presence of the jury.
Approach.
I'll do it if he will, Judge, I promise. If he'll refrain from doing it, I'll be glad to.
No, y'all approach the bench. The other attorneys come to. Bar. Mr. Hilliard?
All right, Agent Snyder. So let's go back to October 7th meeting with Mr. Youngkin, okay? So you set up, did the hotel and the wiretap, right? But then that all went into place that night or the next day? Whatever it
Whatever
says
the
on
next day.
Right, whatever it says on the
Okay.
paperwork is what it did, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so, did you conduct any surveillance other than those two things of the parties?
In what aspect, sir?
Well, I mean, we know that you had the audio and the video in the hotel room. We know that you had Mr. Youngkin's phone tapped. We know that you'd already pulled all of the phone records at that point, correct? Did you ever pull any, and you may or may not have, I'm just asking, did you ever put any of the other family members under surveillance or anything like that?
We placed a pole camera, on a telephone pole outside the residence of the defendant.
Okay. And that's at 535 Buckhalter?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Right. How long was that there?
I couldn't tell you for sure, sir. It was, 30 days at the most.
Now, during the interview that we just saw with Ms. Simon, you kept making statements to her. Some of those statements were true, but not all of those statements were true, were they?
You'd have to,
Point you to the inconsistent or
Exactly.
incorrect statements? Well, one of the things you said was that Paul says something entirely different than what you do. Okay. What was it that Paul said that was entirely different? I don't recall.
yes, I think the clear piece there is Paul told the truth.
Well, that's your answer, but I asked you a specific question. What was an item of information that Paul said that Leilani didn't say?
Yeah, again, throughout the course of the investigation, Paul told the truth, and the defendant didn't tell the truth.
Your Honor, that's a non-responsive answer. Please instruct the witness to answer the question.
Agent, if you would please listen to the question and as best you can, answer the question.
You made a statement that Paul said something entirely different than Leilani Simon in the interview we just watched. What was that piece of information that was completely different?
Objection. Hearsay. And I can elaborate if the court would like me to.
You can elaborate.
Okay.
Did you want us to
Steve?
approach?
Sure.
Agent Snyder, isn't it a common interrogation technique to use half-truths or complete falsities in order to try and induce a defendant to make a statement to you?
That's correct. We We do that through the course of our investigations.
And isn't it also an interrogation technique that you will try and put stress and strain on them along the way to try and induce them to make a statement to you?
That is a technique.
Okay. And stirring up those emotions and keeping them in emotional turmoil is a fairly common interrogation technique, is it not?
That can be a technique that's utilized, yes.
Okay. And is that the technique you employed here?
The video speaks for itself.
Okay. And so you're saying that was not the technique you employed here then?
Specifically, the technique used in this one was something we refer to as a SUE, and that's the strategic use of evidence to get to the facts of the investigation.
Well, let's talk about that. You had multiple interviews with Ms. Simon, correct?
Multiple, yes, sir.
And I guess it's safe to say that many of them were similar to this one, correct?
They were, yes, sir.
Okay. And the one thing is through all of those interviews, she's never admitted to harming her child in any way, correct?
I wouldn't say that's 100% correct, no, sir.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Did she say that she shot her kid?
She did not, no, sir.
Did she say that she stabbed her kid?
She did not, no,
Did she
sir.
say that she strangled her kid?
No, sir, she did not.
Did she say that she beat her kid with a blunt object?
At no point in time did she say she committed a violent act.
Okay. So that was a consistent statement throughout all of the strategic use of evidence. She's never made that statement to you or anyone else, correct?
That's correct.
Let's talk about the hotel camera. So you have the hotel camera. You say that Danny was aware of it. She was not. Did she ever make any statements to Danny in that hotel room like that?
Again, I didn't review 100% of that video, so I couldn't 100% answer that with accuracy.
All right, well, then let's back it up. Did Agent Solomon tell you it was a relevant portion for you to look at and send it to you?
I don't recall, no, sir.
Was that something you would normally recall if you got?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you didn't get it. It wasn't sent to you, right?
That's correct, yes, sir.
All right. Same thing. You had tapped his phone for 60 days at least, and I assume you got all relevant text, phone calls, or intercepts from Leilani Simon to Danny Youngkin, correct?
We got every call that came into Danny Youngkin's phone, both incoming, outgoing calls, just as your phone would obtain those calls. We received every call that came into Danny Youngkin's phone.
And did you review those calls, or were you told the relevant portions of those calls and text with the defendant?
I don't recall the exact number, but you can imagine in a 30 to 60 day period, there were hundreds of calls. So no, I did not review every call, but there were pertinent calls that we do have.
Okay. Any of those pertinent calls say, I harmed my child, or I did this to my child?
Not that I recall, no, sir.
Okay. And again, this is after 60 days of around-the-clock monitoring, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Now, I'm going to talk to you about the interview that we just watched again, and what's a perk 30?
It's a opioid narcotic commonly used following minor to major surgeries as a painkiller.
Okay. It's like, when you say opiate, is it like Oxycontin or something like that? I mean, I don't know what it is. I'm asking you because you'll know more than I will. But what exactly would a common name be that we know about?
I'm not exactly sure. I know it's a combination of like an acetaminophen, so a Tylenol-based drug, in conjunction, with an opioid, a fentanyl, type drug. So it's a lesser degree of a fentanyl, drug in the opioid classification.
All right. And I assume cocaine. Well, let me ask you this. Do you have any knowledge of what the effect of a perk 30 is on somebody if they take it? If you don't, that's fine.
No, I think the defendant explained that herself.
Okay. And what was that effect then?
The best I can recall from seeing the video that you watched was a drunken state, a loopy state. The specific pill that she took had a delayed reaction, she said. I couldn't explain past that.
And that's fine. You might not know. What about cocaine?
What she was doing in the perk, taking the Percocet, the cocaine, and marijuana, commonly referred to on the street, if you will, as speedballing. And those three drugs are what she admittedly was on that night.
Does cocaine put you to sleep, or is it more of a stimulant?
Again, I couldn't tell you, for sure, but it's my understanding that it affects people in different ways. Some individuals, it acts as a stimulant, and some individuals, it does put to sleep.
All right. Well, based upon your experience and training, okay, what have you been trained that the effects of it are?
Again, as I disclosed in an interview, I'm not a narcotics agent, but I can tell you, what she said, what I've heard from other individuals, and that's all I can tell you.
Okay. And was I correct that and I may have just misheard it, but on the interview that we just watched, did Ms. Simon say that Misty or Missy had smoked weed or done drugs, something or something of that point? It was a very fleeting thing. I may have misheard it. I'm just asking you if you recall something like that.
I do recall that. That was about midway through this October the 12th interview, where I allowed her to continue to tell the same story that she had told over and over and over about the orgeal. And when we confronted her on that the first time, she tried to, say, well, the reason that she probably doesn't remember that is because she smokes crack. So defamation of character to a young lady who wasn't even involved in this entire process.
Again, Your Honor, I ask the witness to please answer the question and not proselytize. It's non-responsive.
I'm going to say two things. One, he's answering the question. I'm going to ask you not to go any further than you need to.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Agent Schneider, with your investigation, I guess, in this case, you conducted interviews, you set up the landfill search, and you've been involved in it pretty much from the beginning, if I'm not, is that correct?
100%, yes, sir.
Okay. So, when you said you only got the excerpts from the hotel and video, right? Of Danny and Leilani in the hotel? You were only given short pieces of video to watch, correct?
I've seen short clips of the video. That's correct, yes, sir.
And were you given daily summaries of what happened or summaries of what happened for that entire time frame? I know you didn't monitor it.
There was probably a point in time, where the case team got together and we discussed, that particular CCTV footage. That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay. And the only people that were in that hotel room, though, was Danny and Leilani, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
I don't believe Zane or Sky were there, and I don't believe anybody else was there, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay. And Agent Solomon was the one who was in charge of that one, though, right?
That's correct.
Now, you also, I think that's all the questions I got, Judge. I'll leave it right there.
Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right, very good. So, shall this witness be released?
I'm thinking so, Judge, yeah.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Thank you very much. You're excused. State may call its next witness.
I need a few moments too, Judge, if that's okay.
Okay. Is it enough for a break? A few moments?
I still have to have
Yes, let's let everybody have a minute. Okay, so we're back on the record, SPCR 22-03364J6. I took a few minutes to, first of all, review the exhibit, State's Exhibit 77. And I've come to this determination. Obviously, the material here is of evidentiary value. However, what I would like the state to do is to go through the exhibit and make sure there are no duplicates, one, and number two, that there's no exhibit here or picture here that's not been shown to be those of Quinton. I recognize one of the photos that the earlier anthropologist identified as, well, she identified it as material that was sent to her from the landfill, but that it was not bone, so she didn't make a determination about that. And also, she stated that the the gross amount of material that was transported from here to Quantico contained some material that was either non-human, and not Quinton. So what I would like for you to do is go through and make sure that any photos like that are removed. And I want you to go through and make sure that each photo has its own evidentiary value. And then last, what I want to do is have you present each of these, I keep calling them exhibits, this is Exhibit 77, each one of the individual photos within Exhibit 77, you'll present those to your witness and let them identify it and tell you the information that you believe to be relevant is. But the photos will go in individually. They won't be in a binder. I think the binder really does elevate this particular exhibit and makes it more special. And it's evidence the same as any other evidence today. So I'm going to ask you to go back through, make sure we pare it down, and prepare it to go forward without the notebook. I will tell you, if you like to, you can do it that way, or you can do it on the screen. I know you're not prepared today to do it digitally.
I can do it on the screen, but I do need to respond to a couple of the
Sure.
portions of the courts over there. So first I can say that there are no duplicate images in here. There are 66 images because they took 66 pictures.
Okay.
Those pictures were taken in Savannah. Now, I cannot, and nobody can, probably not even the forensic anthropologist, go through here and say which ones of the bones in these photographs were determined later at the lab to be human versus non-human and call them out here, because that's a determination that wasn't made until the bones were at the lab and each assigned their individual number. So if I were to hand that binder to Dr. Christensen, she could say, 28 TAC 1 I identified as not of human origin, but I didn't take these pictures. I can't tell you which one of these pictures 28 TAC 1 ended up being. So the only way to do this, and what we're trying to do here, is introduce this as an exhibit that represents all of the material that was collected and packaged on November 18 as suspected human remains and sent to Quantico for analysis. Beyond that, that is, I understand why the court has asked me to do that, but that is just simply not something that can be done with this exhibit, because it's a determination that wasn't done until later by the witness that we've already heard from.
The non-human versus human.
Right. I mean, the whole point.
And
of what
I
they're doing-
understand that.
So I can do it. I mean, I guess here's what I would propose. The exhibit marked is authenticated by the clerk, or authenticated by the witness and introduced into evidence. So now we have one binder of evidence. And then of that, I would publish 3 images. 3 images. And the way I can do it is I have them on my computer now. I could pull up 3 images digitally that are in that binder and have the witness talk about those 3 and what they appear to her to be. And what I'm doing here is just the ones that are most obviously human, because that's what she can testify to as a lay witness, I think, and then be done with it. So that's how I would propose to do it.
Okay, so you'll publish three of the photos.
It's like 3 or 4, I think.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I'm not going to hold you there. But the images, the 66 images that are in the binder, you would want those admitted into evidence and be allowed to go out.
It should all come into evidence because it is the evidence that was collected and it is the evidence that was transported. And then, it's the witness from Quantico has now testified that not all, but something like 75 or 80% of those bones were identified as human. To me, I don't think that should stop us from putting in the full suite of pictures of everything that was collected that day and set up for that analysis. It's the evidence in the case.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dean. Mr. Hilliard?
So I understand what Mr. Dean's proposing, because he wants to, and I agree. Those are all the pictures that were taken. They're going to come in as a single exhibit. He's going to publish 3 photographs up there. And my second question is are we not going to broadcast those photographs. That's the only other really concern I had that wasn't addressed yet.
Okay, so your concern is that the images, when shown on the video, that they're not shown.
Right, at least not broadcast for
That's
that,
fine.
for that particular portion.
I don't have a
they
problem
can-
with that, Mr. Dean.
I would support that, Your Honor.
Okay.
So I think that resolves the issue as to these exhibits, if I'm understanding everything correct.
I already got a thumbs up.
So that works for me.
They'll divert the camera. Avert the camera. So, okay. So is there anything else that we need to take up before bringing in the jury?
Not for me, Judge.
No, Your Honor.
All right, very well. Please bring in the jury.
Jurors in sworn.
All right, thank you very much, Williams. Please have a seat. Welcome back. We're going to start up testimony once again. Was everyone able to comply with the instructions? Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. There goes that song again. Okay. All right, Mr. Dean.
Savannah Solomon.
Beautiful temperature. It's 80 degrees outside. Raise your right hand. The evidence you shall give the court and the jury and the trial of this issue should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
All right, good afternoon.
All right, could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hey, my name is Special Agent Savannah Solomon with the FBI.
And what office are you with?
I'm with the Savannah Resident Agency out of the Atlanta Division
How long have you been an FBI special agent?
for 6 years.
And can you tell us a little bit about your educational background before joining the FBI?
I attended Georgia Tech, where I majored in economics, international affairs, and French, and went straight to Tulane for my master's in business administration and finance and entrepreneurship. Following graduation, I joined the FBI as an analyst, where I worked in Charlotte and the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force Fusion Center in Washington, D.C., before becoming an agent for 8 years.
Okay, so after working in Charlotte as an analyst, you went to the academy, I guess?
I went to Washington, D.C. at our headquarters for 3 years, and then the academy.
Okay, and is Savannah, where you've been, Savannah, Georgia, I should say, where you've been the entire time as a full-fledged special agent?
That is correct.
Okay. Do you work closely with Brad Snyder?
I do.
I want to ask you about your involvement in the case. Did you become involved on day one on October 5th?
I did.
And did you go to Chatham County Police Department headquarters and participate in an interview or some interviews?
I did.
What detective were you paired up with?
Detective Nobles.
And whom did you interview that day, of the three that we've been talking about?
Daniel Youngkin.
Okay. Can you tell us about his level of cooperation in the day one interviews?
He was forthcoming in regards to items about Quinton. He minimized on drug use and was defensive of Leilani.
What do you mean by defensive about Leilani?
He believed anything that she had told him that day and was told us he believed it was true.
Okay, so he didn't want to believe that she had done anything, basically.
Correct.
Can you tell us about his demeanor and tone in the interviews and his willingness to answer questions?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for opinion.
You're asking about demeanor that she observed?
Mhm.
I'm gonna.
I interviewed him twice that day, once around 1:30 in the afternoon and once around 11 p.m., so it was a long day. He was willing to answer questions. I'd say by 11 was pretty tired of any line of questioning.
Okay. After your, well, let me ask you this. At some point that day, did you go to the residence at 535 Buckhalter Road?
I did.
And where did that fit into your involvement at Chatham County Police Department headquarters that you've been talking about?
After my first interview of Danny, the group kind of reconvened on what had happened in the different interviews, and because there was no need to continue talking at that point, Taylor, Burns, and I drove to the Buckholder Road residence to assist with the search.
Now, were you present when Chatham County Police Department forensics were photographing the residents and various outbuildings and things?
I was.
And did you go in the garage yourself?
I did.
I'd like to display an image from State's Exhibit 10. It's image 109 in State's Exhibit 10. And let me see whether I can get the screen to cooperate here. All right. See that up on the screen?
I do.
What is that red thing? First of all, what room or building are we in at that house right now?
This is the garage outbuilding beyond, like separate from the house and the pool area.
What is that red thing towards the bottom center of the picture?
That's a Mickey Mouse race car driver toy.
Is it like a stuffy kind of thing?
It is.
Okay. Can you describe how that thing looked to you that day?
As you can see, it's just kind of thrown in a garage with a bunch of tools and covered in cobwebs, and looks like it's been there for a minute.
Was this significant to you at the time?
It was,
And why is that?
because Leilani had reported Quinton missing with his favorite toy, a Mickey Mouse toy.
And is that something that anybody else mentioned to you, him having a favorite toy, Mickey Mouse toy?
No. No one knew about a Mickey Mouse toy when I asked them about it.
Well, let me show you a video clip. At some point, did you have an exchange with the defendant while she was between interviews?
I did.
And can you tell us what was going on at that point? Like, where were you and where was she?
During the resident search, after it had gotten into nighttime, I was called back to Chatham County Police because they needed more people to escort the three individuals that were still there. So at that point, I was just sitting in the hallway with eyes on the different doors, and she was sitting in an interview room.
At some point, did she open up to you about some of her behavioral issues or anger issues?
She did.
I'm going to play for you a clip from State's Exhibit 13. It's a file bearing the file name Interview Room 2126 to 2229.
Need anything? Before we sit down a little bit longer?
Okay.
Thank you so much. Figure out, so thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Did I do well with that?
Yeah, I appreciate you.
As much detail as I could, and I was being like, this is who.
A lot of good detail in here.
Pardon me, this is the wrong clip. I'm looking for Interview Room 2057 to 2103.
There are days that I wake up, or days that something so little just may happen, and it's like a trigger. And it's not. And it's almost like I'm a completely different person. The way I talk, the way I move, the way I look at you, everything, even my tone of voice. You feel that happening? You know? Where it's like, normally when it happens, I finally reached a certain level of anger or stress or whatever it might be at that moment, that I just like a switch. Yeah. I don't even realize it until after I've calmed down that I just seriously tripped on you and treated you like that for a reason. You know, and then I'm left apologizing to everybody that I'm sorry, I'm crazy, I don't know what happened, I don't even know why I did that. And half the time when it happens or randomly happens like that, and it's not like the slowly transition or whatever, it's it's because I don't even know how to explain it. If I'm doing pretty good throughout the day and I got a good day overall, and then something might trigger, it's slower. I can feel it. I can feel myself changing the way I talk, the way I think, the opinions I have, everything. I can feel the difference. But when it happens, like a day like today, with the amount of stuff going on and stress and emotion or whatever, that's just not.
So that was day one of the investigation, right?
Correct.
On that day, was there a point where you spent some time alone with the defendant in a setting that wasn't recorded?
Yes, at some point around that time period of that video clip.
Did it have something to do with a cigarette or something like that?
She needed a smoke break outside, so I walked out with her.
At some point during that interaction, or maybe it was another one that day, did she say something to you about getting a tattoo?
Yes, she showed me her Hawaiian symbol tattoo about the waves going up and down and said that she wanted to get a tattoo in honor of Quinton along with it.
And this was on October 5.
It was
She was talking about getting a tattoo with it.
in honor of him, yes.
Okay. At this point in time, was she still kind of representing the story that Quinton had been abducted?
Yes.
Was anybody yet talking about Quinton being dead?
We suspected it within the investigative team, but it had not been discussed outside of the investigative team.
I'd like to ask you a couple questions about your involvement over the following days. Did you follow up in reference to Danny's workplace?
I did.
Can you describe that follow-up, please? Without talking about what anybody said to you, but what did y'all go out there to do?
Detective Noble and I met with Danny and Leilani's supervisor and spoke with him. He put us in touch with the corporate security who had video footage from the plant or the warehouse.
And did they turn footage around to you?
They did.
Why was it important to you to go out and talk to Danny's boss and to get video footage of what he looked like when he was leaving work?
We were doing our best to corroborate every single statement that had been made to us in the previous 24 hours, to include how and when Danny learned that Quinton was missing.
How he reacted?
Correct.
I'd like to draw your attention to the defendant's October 8th interview with Bridget Brock at the FBI office in Savannah.
Okay.
Were you present for that?
I not in the interview room, but I was in the office out there observing.
How did you observe that interview?
Closed circuit television through the office.
Okay, so did you watch it as it was occurring?
I watched much of it as it was occurring. I was also watching Danny in a simultaneous interview.
Did you observe any unusual behavior by the defendant on that day with reference to Bridget Brock's belongings or equipment or anything?
I did. Agent Brock had stepped out of the room, but the cameras were still rolling, and the defendant walked up to Miss Brock's computer system and unplugged it. And when it made a noise, she plugged it back in and sat back down.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you.
I'm sorry, that was after looking at the cameras and down the hallway.
Was there something about Bridget Brock's notes as well that had been left on the desk?
Not that I observed.
Okay. That evening, October 8th, that was the hotel surveillance operation?
It was.
And how many nights did that go on for? Was it one? Two?
One night.
Okay, just the one night. Were you involved in proposing that idea to Daniel Youngkin?
Yes,
And that would have been like the day before on the 7th?
it was.
Okay. Tell us about his reaction to that proposal.
The day he came to us, he was pretty broken in a lot of ways. He was still trying to figure out what he believed had happened. He was worried about his child, and was beginning to have conflicts between believing Leilani less, but also his loyalties to her, and was working through that. So when we got to the point of talking through a lot of his concerns there, he was willing, and actually was the one who said, are you going to want to wire up the hotel room? And we said, only with your permission. We wouldn't do that without your permission. So.
Are you saying he guessed? I want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
We had it.
Were y'all planning to ask him that?
We were planning to ask him that, so we were going down that road, but he was the first one to address wiring the room.
Okay, so he's the one who brought it up even though you were about to?
Right.
Okay. Can you discuss briefly just the logistics of setting this up and then the monitoring plan that was put in place?
We had 2 adjacent hotel rooms at a nearby hotel, and our tech team worked their magic and used their special techniques to put audio and video monitoring equipment in the one room, and the live monitoring occurred right next door. So as we were in the next door room, we were observing via video feed and audio what was happening right next to us.
Can you, were you involved in monitoring it yourself?
I was there the entire time that they were awake.
Okay.
Yes.
And so you had the opportunity to see all their interactions?
I did.
Can you just sort of, I understand we're talking about like a whole night, but can you kind of summarize the nature of their interactions?
They were emotional, sometimes combative, they were never on the same page with what was going on with Quinton with the investigation. They took breaks to just go get a cigarette or go get a drink and kind of come back.
Was he asking her about the truthfulness or lack thereof of the Oragel story?
Repeatedly.
And what was she saying in response to those inquiries?
She doubled down on the Oragel and brought up her alibi with Miss D.
Is it fair to say that she was telling Danny the same lie that she was telling y'all?
Objection, Your Honor, leading questions.
I mean, the leading question is a question that calls for a particular answer. It's a yes or no question.
He is correct. You can go ahead with your question.
Is it fair to say that she was telling Danny the same lie that she was telling the police?
Yes. She was telling Danny the same story. She was sorry.
Mr. Dean, you can proceed.
I'll just withdraw the questions.
Yes.
Is there anything that occurred during this full evening and night of hotel recordings that
Objection, Your Honor, it's a narrative question now. Open-ended and broad.
I don't know how one could possibly object to a question that hasn't been finished, first of all, and I can assure you it does not call for a narrative response.
Maybe it's overly, Judge. I
And-
promise you that.
Be careful with the microphones for Ms. Natalie.
It's an open-ended question, Judge. It doesn't ask for a specific answer unless the witness testifies to what they want to testify. That's exactly what a narrative question is, and that's improper.
I'm going to overrule and allow Mr. Dean to ask this question.
Was there anything that occurred during the hotel surveillance operation that suggested to you that Danny knew more than he was letting on or anything along those lines?
No.
I'd like to play a couple of clips from these recordings that have already been admitted into evidence and ask you a couple questions about them, okay?
Okay.
This is from State's Exhibit 32, the file beginning with 1941.
Do you mind? Are you going to get mad at me? I'm asking you a question before I ask you this question. No, because I need to know. Are you going to get
No, I
angry?
can't tell you I'm getting angry, but I want questions.
Why did you lie to me
I
about the ordeal?
didn't. I did not like you about the ordeal.
So you went and met Miss.
Yes, and I drove in and I drove out. And they tried to say that again. I asked them to show me a picture of Missy or whatever. Did y'all speak to my phone late? Did you speak to her? Did you speak to her husband? Is what I wanted to know. You know? And they said her husband. Why didn't you speak to her?
I stopped the play back at 1942-18 on the timestamp. What was that claim that the defendant just made about what the FBI told her as to whom they had interviewed in reference to the Misty story? What did she say there?
She stated we had not spoken to the person she referenced as Misty, but we had spoken to that person's husband.
She said that y'all told her that.
Correct.
Okay. And this is on the night of the 8th, right?
Correct.
You said you were there for observing Bridget Brock's interview with the defendant earlier on this day, right?
Yes.
Had anybody from the FBI told her anything like that?
No.
I'm opening up the clip on the same exhibit, the file name that begins 2029. And I'm going to start the playback at 20:33:05 on the timestamp.
And you went and met Miss.
You ain't met Missy, got ordeal.
And you said they told her?
I think so, yes.
What did she say?
And she confirmed it.
She confirmed
I'm
it?
pretty sure, yes. It's not like they sat there and told me what was said.
Oh, but they.
They said that they spoke to Missy and they didn't push me no more about the ordeal.
Oh, okay.
What we just heard there, is that an accurate characterization of the defendant's interactions with Bridget Brock during that interview earlier that day?
No.
Sometime shortly after this, October 8th hotel room monitoring thing, is that when the phone wire operation started?
It started on October 9th, yes.
And was Danny cooperative with that as well?
Yes, he and his mother gave consent for us to monitor his cell phone.
Were you involved in the monitoring of that wiretap moving forward in time?
I was.
Were you like a point person for it?
I was. I reviewed it every day.
Okay. I want to move forward to the October 12th interview. We've heard testimony from Special Agent Snyder about this. I just want to ask you about a couple of things. Was there a point, what's the main point of bringing her in? Were you bringing her in to notify her of anything in particular that day on October 12th?
That was the day that we provided the death notifications and notifications of landfill search to the family members.
And at what point in that day or that interview did you notify the defendant of that?
We never actually said that Quinton was dead with her. It was understood. So maybe halfway through the time, we made it clear, but we never said the word dead.
At some point during that interview, did you tell her something to the effect of, we're about to start searching that landfill and we're 98% sure we're going to find Quinton in it?
I was very confident we were going to find Quinton in the landfill when I spoke to her, yes.
Did you tell her that?
Yes.
How did she react to that?
She said he wasn't in the bag, but it was hard to characterize. It wasn't shock, which is the most surprising thing of it.
Did you inform her mother, the defendant's mother, Billy Joe Howell, of the same thing at some point that day?
About an hour later,
Yeah, was that after the defendant's interview had concluded?
it was.
Where were you when you informed the defendant's mother of that?
Brad and our victim specialist and I went to the Buckhalter Road residence and informed her in her living room.
And how did she react when you told her that?
I told her in order. I told her I was going to tell her 3 things, and when she was done processing one, we would move to the next. So the first thing I told her was that Quinton had died. And she showed anguish. When she was ready to hear the next thing, I told her that we were going to find him in the landfill and that we would be announcing that search was commencing. And she pulled back from me and she said, "My baby is in the trash." And
Your Honor, hearsay, she knows that.
I'm sorry,
Sustained,
may I respond, please, Ralph?
please.
The witness is describing Billy Joe Howell asking a question. It can't be a statement offered for the truth, it's a reaction.
She can offer a reaction. But the question, well, what she stated was what she said, what Billy Joe said.
When you,
And-
I understood, Your
Yes.
Honor. When you said that to Billy Joe Howell, that you believed him to be in the landfill and that you were gonna find him in the landfill, did she make any statements of fact to you in response to that?
no,
How did she react?
shock, horror, disbelief, anguish. That there were 4 other people that we then notified that were at the house, and it was a picture of 5 different versions of anguish.
And was there a contrast there in how those people reacted and how the defendant had reacted earlier that day when you told her?
Yes.
Now, what was your, I want to ask you some questions about October 24th.
Okay.
Okay, but first I'd just like to ask you about, what was your typical day like between October 12th and October 24th? What did that look like for you?
Landfill operations commenced a few days following the 12th. So as those were going, I would get to the landfill for the sunrise brief to try to represent the case team and give some sort of morale or update motivation. I would go back to the office and review Danny's calls and texts from the previous day and attend to any investigative or administrative work that needed to be done. We were continuously following leads from the public and additional investigative avenues to make sure that we didn't close any doors too soon. And then Taylor and I would drive to the landfill to meet the team as they were wrapping up ahead of their lunch break so we could check boots, give updates, check on the status of everything, and kind of go in with everybody, and then back to the office.
Now, moving to October 24th, on this day, did the defendant make any recorded statements to anybody other than law enforcement?
Yeah, she was on the local news.
And did you watch that news interview?
I did.
Do you see in front of you an exhibit marked as State's Exhibit 71?
I do.
All right. Your Honor, this is a certified copy of the defendant's October 24th news interview with WTSC. It's supported by a testing certificate. I would move this in State 71 at this time.
Without objection.
Now, do you see in front of you a disc marked as State's Exhibit 72?
I do.
Now, do you know what that is? You need to pull it out of the envelope to see or what?
It's labeled WTOC interview redacted.
Okay. How does that exhibit differ from the one you just introduced?
This one is titled, Exhibit 71 is titled WTOC interview.
Okay. But I mean, what is 72 in relation to 71?
72 is what was shown on the news.
Okay.
And the 71 is the unredacted footage from WTOC.
Okay. And so 72 is
what was shown on the news from WTOC
Okay.
of the news article.
72, is that like just the portions from the WTOC broadcast stitched together to show only the defendant talking?
Yes,
And like not the anchors and reporters and so forth?
yes.
At this point, Your Honor, I can introduce Case Exhibit 72.
No objection.
Now, what are we going to hear the defendant say in this video? To the extent you remember.
That she didn't know where Quinton was and hoped he would be found, but if she had had anything to take responsibility for, that she would.
And with that, I'll publish it, Your Honor.
My kids woke up to me screaming, "Where's Quinton?" and running through the house. I ran and looked everywhere, inside, outside, just screaming for help. I've been here every day since this. I am not running and I'm not hiding. And if something does come up that I am at fault, I will take myself to that police station.
And I will walk with her.
All we want is justice for Quinton Simon. That's it. We want justice for Quinton.
Whatever cost it is. We don't care the cost.
We want answers just like everybody else does. At the end of it all, we love you, baby Q. My little monkey, and we want to pull.
So that was an interview that was filmed and aired on October 24th, right?
Yes.
Had you been in contact with her via telephone during the investigation?
With both Leilani and Billy, yes.
Can you tell us how you came to be in phone contact with the defendant?
On one of the days the team was at the residence, I walked out to give a backpack to her brother because it had medication in it, and during that conversation, the defendant offered me her phone number.
So from that point forward, you're able to call and text with her, I guess?
Yes.
Okay. This same day, October 24th, that she does this interview where she says, "We don't know what happened, we just want answers and justice, and if he's alive, we want home." Did she send you a text message saying something different from that?
She did.
Do you see in front of you a document marked as State's Exhibit 73?
I do.
Can you tell us, is that a portion of your text message traffic with the defendant?
It is.
All right. Does it fairly and accurately depict at least this portion of the messages that the two of you exchanged?
It does.
Your Honor, I would introduce this as State 73. Let me look at it.
No objection, Judge.
Exhibit 73 is admitted without objection.
All right. On the first page, you with me?
I am.
Okay. Do you see that last entry at the bottom
I do.
there? Is this an incoming text that you received from the defendant or an outgoing text that you sent?
It is an incoming text that I received.
And what is the date and time of this text?
October 24th, 2022 at 5:45 p.m.
So that would have been right about the time that this interview was airing on the evening news, I guess?
Probably, yes.
Okay. What did she message you at that time?
Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
I'm not lying for Danny anymore. The reason why my story about Oragel and shit didn't make sense was because Danny told me to say that. He was the one who left, and my phone was in the car from my previous trip, and his was on the charger. I was already smoking a blunt on the porch, and when I got done, Danny was already laying in bed. All the lights were off, and I glanced at the kids as I was getting in the bed to go to sleep. That is why he took off. I'm innocent of this. He was the last one to see Quinton. He is that texted the babysitter, and he was that wasn't in bed when I woke for just a moment, and it was still dark, and he was the one who the only set of keys to my car the morning of my son's disappearance.
Now, did you later bring her in for an interview to memorialize that statement?
I did.
Formal interview. And when was that conducted?
October 31st
Where was it conducted?
at the FBI office.
What was your approach in this interview?
We really just wanted to have, it was a new story, and so we wanted to make sure that we had correctly captured what she was presenting to us. So we asked her to talk about what she had provided in the text and to just give the context and the complete story of that.
And did she essentially repeat to you what she had said in the text message?
More or less over the course of longer.
Okay. During this interview, we've seen some interviews to this point where she's sort of being challenged on things and has a certain reaction to that. During this interview, were you challenging her or pushing back, or were you more just letting her talk?
No, the goal was to just let her talk and get her whole story.
And what was her demeanor like in this interview?
She was affable. We were laughing, the three of us, Detective Lemons and I, and Leilani. She was open, calm.
Now, did you, on this same day that that interview was conducted, did you all collect DNA samples from the defendant and her mother?
We did.
Can you tell me about the process for doing that? Who did it and what was done?
Usually we let them do it themselves when they're consenting. Basically, you have a giant Q-tip, and you scrape the inside of the cheek to get some cheek cells, and you place it in a plastic baggie and seal it up in front of everybody.
All right, and is it marked with the name of the person who it came from?
It is.
Did you log those into evidence at the Savannah FBI office?
I did.
One item for the defendant's DNA sample and one for her mother's?
That's correct.
All right, were you involved in having those sent to the FBI lab at Quantico at some point?
Yes, I directed them to be FedExed to the lab.
And did that happen?
It did.
Okay. When did that happen in relation to November 18, the day that the remains were discovered?
We sent the DNA up on or around November 1st, just so it would be ready for the lab.
Okay. Now, we've talked a little bit about the phone monitoring operation. And I think you said you were the one who was doing that on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
Do you see in front of you a disc marked as State's Exhibit 74?
I do.
Okay. Do you know what that disc is?
These are select recordings from Danny's wire.
Did they fairly and accurately capture a couple of the conversations that they had during this investigation?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would introduce this as State 72.
Objection.
Sorry, it's 74.
74.
And I would ask to publish just the portions of this. There are two files on this disk. The first one is a call with the date 10/30/2022 in the subject line. When would that call have been made?
This would have been the night before. That Halloween interview would have been made on October 30th.
Okay. And I'm going to open that file up and play starting at 9:50.
I've been getting up every day, 7 or 8 in the morning is what happens. So I guess with sober in the morning, I wake up early, I go to bed at a decent time. I get up in the morning and make breakfast for everybody and clean the house. And I'm a completely different person. I didn't know this when I clean the house and I do dishes.
Yeah, it's been a while since you've done that.
Yeah, well, I know. I actually cooked dinner, and I did the things you deserved for me to do. I'm sorry. I'll never touch cook or cooking with you. I become angry and impulsive when I want it.
Stop the playback at 11:05. What was it we heard her say there about the effect of cocaine on her?
That it makes her angry and impulsive.
The next file on this disk has the date 10/31/2022 in the file name. When would that call have been made?
The evening of October 31st, 2022.
Is that the same day of the interview in which she was putting it on Danny?
It is.
And I'm going to play here from 27:02 on. I'll go with 27:03.
So what did you do when you went out after I fell asleep?
All I was waiting for my phone and got out of my job.
All right, what was that exchange there that we heard?
Danny asked Leilani again what she had done after he'd gone to sleep the night that Quinton disappeared, and she said that she had done a line and went out to get the Oradil.
Now, did that conflict in any way with what she had just told you in the October 31st interview?
It did.
In what manner?
she said that she didn't go get Orajel and during the interview, and that Danny had been the one driving the car.
Now, at some point, well, you were at the residence on October 5th at some point, right?
I was.
It was the pack and play that Quinton was said to have been sleeping in, and the pillowcase in the pack and play. Was that taken into evidence?
That day it was, yes.
What agency initially took it into evidence?
The Chatham County Police Department.
And was the pillow and pillowcase at some point turned over to you from the Chatham County Police Department?
It was.
Who gave it to you?
Detective Lemons.
Okay, and what did you do with it?
I prepared it to be FedExed to the lab for analysis.
In Quantico?
The FBI lab, yes, in Quantico.
And did that happen? Was it FedEx to the lab?
It was.
Okay. Now I'd like to ask you about November 18. Okay?
Okay.
Were you involved in the coordination and supervision of the landfill search throughout?
Yes, I staffed all of the volunteers from Savannah and Brunswick. And as I mentioned earlier, I was present at least twice a day. If I didn't have administrative or investigative work on a given day, I was dressed out searching.
Now, we've heard some testimony to this point that suspected human remains were found there that day after some period of unsuccessful searching. Were you there at the outset of that discovery that day?
I was at the United States Attorney's Office facilitating an interview, and Brad called me and said that a skull had been found, and I immediately left the meeting at the U.S. Attorney's Office and quickly got to the landfill and was there for the rest of the day and the additional findings.
Can you describe what was going on when you got there? What was the scene like at the landfill?
Somber, but everyone was looking very, very carefully. We knew we were looking for small pieces of a small child, and fortunately the skull is more recognizable, and so we had believed that if we found one piece, all other pieces that we would find would be within 6 feet of the trash as it was compacted. So we knew that that was our day when we found him at the beginning of the day. And so we were, as you can imagine, there are a lot of bones in a landfill. And so we had to sort through chicken wings and T-bones and all of that to find what would appear to be human and separate those out. And that was throughout the day.
What do you remember about the period of time that passed from the first apparent item, I guess from the first apparent item of human remains being found and you getting that call from Brad to when you all kind of stopped identifying suspected human remains that day? How long did that process of discovery take?
It took, I would estimate, around 5 to 6 hours. We finished the search from where the skull had been found, laid out more trash and searched that and broke for lunch. That search section had been pushed over during lunch, but then we realized that there were more likely bones within it that appeared to be human. And so I asked them to pull the deck back, meaning the trash they pushed aside that we'd been through, they were able to pull it back with the bulldozer, and we researched that. And so after that, we did one more deck, maybe two, without finding anything, and that was the end of the day.
What do you mean by one more deck, maybe two? What is that?
So the landfill had laid out a large open space that was flat. And we knew the pretty specific area where we expected to find Quinton, but trash as far as Statesboro was coming to our landfill. And so you imagine it compacted very quickly. So we had to dig through the compacted trash, pull out a reasonable amount to search at a time in a safe place. We had safety officers out because there's a lot that can cut you. And we didn't have an issue with noxious fumes, but that was also a concern. So we pull that out. The safety officers would look through the deck and make sure that the search team was cleared to go forward. And then we had these rakes, and you would rake through every little piece and open trash bags that were still open and work your way until you had discarded all of the trash behind you, and the group kind of converged in a circle and turned in the bones that we had collected or the items of interest that we weren't quite sure, just needed someone else to look at. Most of us carried a bag on our taped to ourselves so we could just drop the bones in and keep going when there was something like a skull or, on this day, a swath of skin or pieces that needed immediate attention. We would call someone forward. Since I was not a searcher that day, I would go onto the deck to get pieces to bring back to the evidence tent.
How far apart on the search deck were pieces of Quinton found from one another?
That's kind of hard to describe because he was strewn, because he'd been strewn when he was compacted into his place of rest at the time, and then the bulldozer dug up chunks and laid out the deck, and then we spread them out. And so he was found across 2 or 3 decks, and the decks were, half a football field. So many searchers found different pieces of him, yes.
So if you do the math, 3 different decks, each of which is maybe a half of a football field, talking about like 1.5 football field area over which pieces of Quinton were found.
Once he was spread out, or once the decks were spread out, yes.
Do you see in front of you a binder marked as State's Exhibit? Do you see in front of you a binder?
I do.
Is it marked as a State's Exhibit?
It is. It's marked
What's
as
the number?
77.
Okay. Could you take a look through that and tell me if you recognize it? What's in there?
I do.
What are you looking at there?
I'm looking at evidence photos of human remains.
And are those the pieces of Quinton you were talking about being found that day?
They are.
Okay. Where were these photographed before they were transported to the lab at Quantico?
They were.
Okay. And do these photographs fairly and accurately depict the suspected remains of Quinton Simon as you viewed them that day?
They do.
Your Honor, I would introduce this as State's Exhibit 77.
Subject to the publishing and, I guess, rules we talked about earlier, Judge, no objection.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. Yeah, 77 is admitted.
Thank you. I'd like to publish just a few, first of all, there's like 60-some pictures in there, right? I'd like to publish just a few of them and ask you a couple of questions about them, okay?
Okay.
Can you flip to the first page in that binder?
Yes.
Is this it up on the screen here?
It is.
What does that appear to you to be, and what did it appear to you to be that day?
It is the top half of a skull.
Sorry.
That's-
Can you flip to the second image in this binder?
Yes.
What does this appear to you to be, and what did it appear to you to be that day?
When we found this and brought it to the tent, we weren't sure when we saw it from here. What I know now and can see is it is a severed foot, cut from the ankle, looking from the inside of the ankle down.
Can you see one of the ankle bones in this image just to orient us?
Yes, to orient, this is the ankle bone where it was cut, and then you see almost a left toenail, and you can start seeing the shape of the foot from there.
Turning to the next page in the binder.
Yes.
What is this?
That is the same foot flipped over, so you can clearly see the skin of the foot. This is his heel, and then you shake down to the tips of the toe bones through the 5. We had a huge poster of Quinton after bath time, dressed and barefooted, on the top of the landfill to remember what we were looking for, and so we had been looking at his foot and his forehead for 5 weeks, and that is what we found. That is his foot.
And finally, the fourth image in the biter.
Yes.
What do you believe this to be?
I believe that it is a swath of skin going from the length of a body, of a toddler's body. So the shoulders come through the back and then down one leg. This was a piece that Officer Zerke passed to Kim Johnson, who passed to me as we carried out with tongs, because at the time it was hard to recognize, but we knew it stood out from everything else we had seen in the landfill.
Now, I'd like to ask you some questions about getting Quinton up to the FBI lab in Quantico, okay? We've heard testimony from Special Agent Taylor Burns that he was responsible for initially transporting Quinton's remains from the landfill that day to the FBI office in Savannah. Does that align with your recollection?
Yes, we all met him at the office afterwards.
And he's described the packaging of Quinton into 4 different bags and placing him inside of a box.
Yes.
Were you involved in a further transport of Quinton to the FBI lab?
I was.
Can you tell us about that?
Starting from the beginning of the day, or just the logistics?
What happened who took them from the FBI lab in Savannah to anywhere else?
So we arranged for private transport for Quinton. No one felt comfortable FedExing him or putting him on any other way. So I wrapped the box and drove him to Macon, where I met another agent who is on our fly team. And I handed Quinton to Agent Keys, who took him to Atlanta and kept him secure until the next day, where he flew him on an FBI aircraft to meet the lab in Virginia.
Is that how Quinton got to the FBI lab at Quantico?
It is.
Do you see in front of you 2 pictures stapled together and marked as State's Exhibit? I think it should be 93, is that right?
92?
92? Okay. Do you recognize those images?
I do.
What do those images show?
That is how I wrapped Quinton's box to transport him. And so the first image was what I could offer to the family when I gave a second death notification. And the second image is how he rode with me in our truck.
Do these images fairly and accurately depict the events that you've been talking about?
Yes, I took the second picture myself.
I'd offer this in a State's Exhibit 92, Ron.
Without objection.
Publish the first image here. Can you describe to us what we're seeing here?
We had Scott Schumann and Jeff Allen were at the office with me for me to retrieve Quinton and to borrow Scott's work truck to drive him. We 3 of us had just a quiet time wrapping him appropriately, and we thought this would be a nice image to be able to give. It's what I gave to Leilani and Billy Joe when I told them we had found him in the landfill. But he is in that box. He's in the bags in the box, and we wrapped it in a black cloth, and then the flag.
Moving on to the second image.
That is Quinton in my back seat, how he rode with me on the way to Macon.
One moment, please, Ryan. What was the date that Quinton made it to the lab in Quantico? Do you remember?
On or around November 21st.
We talked a little bit earlier about the defendant telling you via text message on October 24, and then in an interview on October 31, that she actually hadn't driven to Azalea and had been dancing with her phone or something like that. Do you remember talking about that?
I do.
Did she eventually admit to you that that wasn't true?
Yes. About Danny?
Yeah.
Yes.
And was that on November 21st in her final interview?
Yes.
Okay. And did she tell you at that time that what she had said about Danny on October 24th and October 31 was just a theory that she was throwing out there?
That's correct.
One moment, please. When evidence is submitted to the FBI lab, is it submitted under a particular FBI case number?
It is.
Was that done in this case with all the items that you've discussed?
Yes.
What was that FBI case number?
7C-AT-3665337.
Say that last one again.
3665337. The Quinton Simon case.
I just asked how you, I expected you to have to refer to your notes. How is it that you remember that? I'll tell you that.
We saw it a lot.
No further questions, Ron.
Judge, can we vote for a second?
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 15-minute break, come back. We're going to recess for that period of time,